We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Thanks for joining us for another episode of American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And this week we venture down the blood-spattered hallways of the school that couldn't scream, looking for an answer to the question, what have you done to Solange, from 1972.
The School That Couldn't Scream, and any other name it's known under, was directed by Massimo Dallamano from a screenplay by Bruno di Geronimo and Massimo Dallamano. It was produced by Fulvio Lucisano, Leo Pescarolo, and Horst Wendland for Italian International Films and Constantin Films. It was distributed in the United States by AIP Film Exchange for Newport, a division of Hallmark Releasing Corporation.
Wow, that was complicated. The School That Couldn't Scream stars Fabio Testi as Enrico Rosseni, Karin Baal as Herta Rosseni, Joachim Fuchsberger as Inspector Barth, Cristina Galbó as Elizabeth Seccles, Günther Stoll as Professor Bascombe, Claudia Butenuth as Brenda Pilchard, Camille Keaton as Solange Beauregard, Pilar Castell as Janet Bryant, Giovanna de Bernardo as Helen Edmonds, Maria Monti as Mrs. Erickson, Giancarlo Bedesi as Mr. Erickson.
It also stars Antonio Casale as Mr. Newton, Vittorio Fanfoni as Billings, Mario Mariani as Father Weber, Emilia Wolkowitz as Ruth Holden, Danielle Micheletti as Mr. Bryant, Antonio Anelli as Father Herbert, Rainier Penkert as Mr. Leach, Carla Mancini as Susan Mills, John Gayford as Joseph Kane, Maria Michi as Mrs. Pilchard, and an uncredited Joe D'Amato as CID Man.
Joe D'Amato was the director of photography for this film, and of course he would go on to do many sleazy films throughout the 70s. He was responsible for a number of the Black Emanuel films and Ator the Flying Eagle, and would go on to do more and more sleazy films throughout the 80s and 90s, into outright porn.
Good for him. All right, buckle up. This is quite the story. The School That Couldn't Scream opens with girls riding bikes in slow motion as a melancholy piano tune plays and the credits roll.
The credit sequence is shown in a monochrome orangish tone, but once we're through, we get to see some proper color as a couple is laying down in a rowboat. This is Enrico Rosseni and Elizabeth Seccles.
He's trying to make love to her, but she doesn't want to. He's Italian and she's English. Also, he's a lot older than her.
Now, she says she wants to, but she isn't sure about it. He accuses her of not trusting him, and he moves in on her again, but she suddenly sits up. She saw something in the woods.
She says she saw a girl running through the woods.
Enrico accuses her of making things up to avoid having to deal with his advances. She apologizes, promising to close her eyes and try again. All is well for about 3 seconds, then she opens her eyes and sits up again. I did see a knife, she says.
Yeah, and we see it too. It's actually pretty horrible. It's a knife being thrust between a girl's legs. First of all, that is sick. And second of all, I can't see how she would have spotted that from where she was lying down. She was lying down looking straight up, and yet somehow this came into her field of view, and the girl was running opposite to where she was drifting. But for the purposes of the story, we'll let it slide.
This time, Enrico is unable to calm Elizabeth down.
You have an excuse for everything, he says, and then he complains in his thick Italian accent about her going to a Victorian school has put ideas in her head and how she can't just be a normal girl and have sex with a grown man who's also her teacher. Oh, did we forget to mention that? He's her teacher.
They go ashore, but looking around, they see nothing. Elizabeth insists it wasn't her imagination, but Enrico looks doubtful. Elizabeth asks to be taken home, and as they leave, Enrico drops a pen. So the two of them drive back into London. Enrico drops Elizabeth off so she can grab her bicycle. Then he follows her in his car as she rides to school. Enrico smiles and honks his horn at her all the way.
Back home, at what is obviously the next day, Enrico is dressing. The news is blaring on the radio. He yells at his wife, whose name is Herta, to turn it down. But before she does, the announcer starts a story about a dead girl found on the banks of the Thames. At this point, Herta snaps off the radio, but Enrico wants to hear this news.
Enrico runs to the radio to turn it back on and asks his wife why she just did what he asked her to.
He hears the tail end of the story and finds out that the police have just begun their routine or investigation and have yet to identify the victim.
A short time later, outside, Enrico and Herta exchange glares as Herta climbs into a taxi.
Yeah, we find out they work together, but they are driving in separately, so this is one frosty marriage.
Instead of going to work, Enrico heads back to the area where Elizabeth claimed to have seen that knife. It is now an active investigation, and Scotland Yard is on the scene. Enrico joins the crowd in gawking at the body of the girl still laying in the grass.
She's half covered by a sheet, but her face is exposed.
Normally they would have at least cleared the body from the scene before the story hit the news, right?
Yeah, you'd think. The police warn Enrico to back away from the cordoned-off area.
Several flashes go off as the police and the press are all taking pictures.
This is very odd that the press is there, and the story has already been leaked to the radio, and yet this is an active crime scene. You'd think that news wouldn't come out till later, but apparently some looky-loos called it in.
Enrico, having seen all that he needs to see, decides it's time to go to work. As he arrives, the porter comes out and informs him that Scotland Yard is in there waiting to speak with him. So Enrico goes into a staff meeting. Mr. Leach, the headmaster, says that they've been waiting for Enrico to join them so they could get started.
They want to speak to everyone at the same time.
Herta, also on the staff, is there as well, and Enrico apologizes for his late arrival, blaming his tardiness on car trouble. This particular meeting is being run by Inspector Barth of Scotland Yard. He has pictures of the murder victim and shows them to the staff members one by one. As the headmaster introduces each of them, we learn that Herta teaches German and music, and Enrico teaches gymnastics and Italian.
Wow, they're versatile. And the other teachers are introduced as well. The only one worth noting is Mr. Newton, the chemistry teacher, I think. And the religious staff is there too, Father Weber.
When Enrico is shown the photograph, he recognizes the victim as one of his students, Hilda Eriksson. The inspector already knows her name, but that's all that they do know. He was hoping to find out something about her day-to-day activities, but now that her identification has been confirmed, he has to inform her parents, who reported her missing last night.
As Inspector Barth goes, he says to Enrico, "You're Italian, right?" Enrico confirms it, asking what difference does that make. And then Herta jumps in to defend her wayward hubby by saying that he's lived in London for years. I'm not sure what difference that makes either.
I know, smiles Inspector Barth as he leaves.
The headmaster addresses Enrico directly, telling him to tell his pupils what happened to Hilda, because his informal relationship with them, if you know what I mean, will be useful in this situation. And then we see that someone is watching through the keyhole, as the headmaster tells Enrico to spare them the details when he talks to his pupils. Before the door opens, though, we see it's the porter who is peeping in through the keyhole.
So Enrico goes to the gymnastics class where the girls are already stretching. Enrico has them gather around to tell them the ghastly news. He tells them that something serious has happened and they won't be seeing Hilda again. Is she dead? Asks one girl, who breaks into tears when Enrico nods yes. Another girl, Brenda, goes to comfort her, but says to Enrico that she knew Hilda was dead. Hilda's mother called Brenda's mother last night looking for her.
Hilda never stays out late. And then Father Herbert, another priest at the school, walks into the room saying he thinks he can be of help rather than letting the girls bombard Enrico with questions. And then he tells them to get dressed. And they're getting dressed for church. The girls are seated in the pews, except for Elizabeth, who, instead of joining her classmates at Mass, goes outside. She takes off her headscarf and runs down the street to get into Enrico's car.
As they drive off, she tells Enrico she can only stay a few minutes, but Enrico has more serious things on his mind at the moment. He asks her if she's heard about Hilda and if she saw the killer yesterday. Elizabeth says she definitely saw the knife, but beyond that, she only saw a shadow.
She says she should go to the police.
Enrico pulls the car over and says she can't do that. They will ask who she was with. He tells her she cannot always do what she wants.
While true, that's not really applicable here. He says that he needs time to prepare Herta, letting her know that Enrico is in love with Elizabeth, his student. Plus the scandal that would cause. It's her last year at the school, so she agrees with his points, especially the one about his wife.
Later, Enrico returns home to find Herta waiting for him. She asks where he has been. He answers that a suspicious wife makes a very boring character.
She says that Enrico doesn't even pretend to keep up appearances anymore, and then calls him out on his lie about the car.
And she has the evidence to back this claim up. A picture of the Hilda Eriksson crime scene appeared in the newspaper, and Enrico is prominently featured in the photo. She throws the paper at him, and as he looks at it, we cut to the same photo in the office of Inspector Barth. Only now, Enrico's face is circled in red ink.
And Barth is there with Enrico, wanting to know why Enrico was there at the crime scene this morning. Morbid curiosity, says Enrico. Barth wonders how he got to the crime scene 20 minutes after the news was broadcast, when all they said was the crime happened on the right bank of the Thames, not which part, and as you may know, the Thames is an extremely long river. It could have been anywhere, north, south of the city. Enrico defensively says that others were there, but Barth points out that they were just passers-by, not people who specifically sought out the scene of the crime.
Yet Enrico seemed to know exactly where to go. Are you insinuating that the murderer always returns to the scene of the crime? Asks Enrico. No, says Barth, but he does feel that Enrico is hiding something, and the inspector doesn't like that. Next he asks where Enrico was the previous evening. Enrico says he was driving around the city, alone. He explains that he had a row with the missus and wanted to cool off. The inspector has heard enough and excuses him, but one more thing. Hilda Eriksson was a student of Enrico's, but Enrico seems unfazed by her death.
He says Hilda decided to take Italian instead of French because of him, a teacher who's young, likable, and always on the girl's side against the headmaster. Yet Enrico is too distracted by something to care, it seems.
Enrico asks how horrible Hilda's death was, and the inspector tells him it was a slow, painful, lonely death.
The killer left her to die alone from her knife wound, which took about an hour. Enrico leaves and we stay with Inspector Barth, who asks one of his forensic police officers how it's going. The forensic analyst shows him plaster casts of footprints and a pen found about 100 yards from the crime scene, which he's having fingerprinted. He also found a stick pin on the body.
Next, Inspector Barth goes to meet with the Ericksons, the parents of the deceased. Mr. Erickson asks when they can see their daughter's body, and Barth asks that he and his wife take a seat. He tells them he will take them to see Hilda when the time comes, but right now he wants to ask them about Hilda's day-to-day activities. Mr. Erickson said that the day of the murder they went to Mass, then Hilda went to confession. That evening Hilda went out around 7 o'clock and never came home. Barth asked if maybe Hilda had a boyfriend. Mrs. Erickson says no, she would have told her. Barth says he was just asking.
That's all Inspector Barth needs to know. Then Mr. Erickson asks if Hilda was raped.
Mrs. Erickson looks as if the thought never crossed her mind, then bursts into tears.
Another police officer escorts her out of the room, leaving Hilda's father alone with Inspector Barth, who says, in a certain way, yes, she was raped. Then he takes him into another room to show him an x-ray from the body, where we see that Hilda had a knife lodged in her pelvis. Hilda's dad looks shocked, and we hold on that scene until we transition into Hilda's funeral, where he's sitting in the pew with the same expression on his face. It's actually a really good transition.
All the students of the school are in attendance at the Mass for Hilda's funeral, and the girls take communion and confession. There are 2 confessionals here, and Elizabeth goes to the regular one with Father Herbert, and then a second priest goes to the other confessional, and since it's open, Janet goes to use that one.
Elizabeth finishes her contrition quickly, but Janet is unburdening herself about something serious at the other confessional by the unknown priest we saw sneak in. It's not Father Weber, because he's giving communion right now.
Later, Elizabeth's back at home when the phone rings. She runs to the phone telling her uncle that she'll get it. It's Enrico on the line, and he's subletting an apartment from Zach Galifianakis so he and Elizabeth can have some privacy.
I knew you were going to say that. It's a guy with a big bushy beard.
But he's not telling her this. He just says he has a surprise for her, and he gives her an address to go to.
At the apartment, the man subletting the apartment leaves the keys and accepts a bouquet of flowers that's obviously meant for Elizabeth.
As Elizabeth is rushing out to meet Enrico, her uncle stops her and asks her if that was Deborah on the phone. Elizabeth says yes, and they're going out. Her uncle asks her not to stay out too late, and Elizabeth assures him she'll stay clear of the riverbank, and then she rides off on her bicycle.
And we follow her. She pedals through London, and then suddenly she's being pursued by a car. We can't see the driver.
She obliviously rides down the street, unaware that she's being followed.
But it tracks her all the way to her destination and then passes by. Elizabeth goes in the building, rides up the elevator, and knocks on Enrico's door. He opens it and they canoodle a bit before he shows her the flowers. It's a trap, she says.
He begins showing her around when the phone rings. Enrico answers, but there's no one on the other line. A cutaway reveals a gloved hand hanging up the phone. Enrico says it must have been a wrong number because no one knows that they're there.
He continues the tour after he hangs up the phone. She loves the bathroom, but wants to make love somewhere besides the bathtub. Enrico likes the sound of that. And then we cut to the bedroom where there is some activity going on.
But it's somewhat spoiled when Elizabeth starts having flashbacks of Hilda's murder and the knife penetrating her body. Elizabeth says she feels as if that knife was meant for her.
We stay with Enrico, but he's back at home now, griping about the German language to Herta. Herta says he likes a more delicate language, just as he likes other kinds of soft things. Enrico wonders what she's on about, so she says she's trying to make it easier for him to confess something he's been circling around like a vulture but hasn't had the courage to say.
Then she asks him about Hilda Erickson. Why did he run off to see her body? Were they having sex? Enrico starts to protest, but he's saved by the bell, in this case the doorbell, as Inspector Barth has come a-calling. Enrico offers him a drink and tells him to make himself at home. As Enrico pours him a scotch, Barth pulls out the pen they retrieved from the crime scene and places it on the table. The inspector says that he's given Enrico a week to tell him what he knows, but now he's having to be more direct. Barth pulls out a notebook and says he'd like to go over the points of the case and asks for a pen.
Herta helpfully announces that Enrico's pen is right there and hands it to him, as Enrico looks on shocked.
The inspector says he'd like to ask Enrico a few questions, and Herta excuses herself because this sounds like man talk.
Inspector Barth says they found a pen just like the one he's holding by the body. Left by the killer, asks Enrico. No, he says, by a witness.
Enrico sighs and stands up. He'll tell Barth what he knows, as long as he agrees to keep everything between the two of them. He says he didn't see anything, but the person he was with did. As he's speaking, we see Herta is eavesdropping on them from the other room.
She's on the other side of the bookshelf, able to see them. Enrico describes what Elizabeth saw and says that he didn't believe her, but when he heard the news, he rushed out there like the fool he is. Barth says Elizabeth Seccles, meaning that was his companion, and Enrico says yes. She's a niece of Colonel Douglas Seccles. Barth says he'll have to question Elizabeth, and says he'll be discreet, but if Elizabeth says something he can use, he'll have to explain how he found out.
Enrico says she only saw a knife glinting in the sun. How can that be of help? And the inspector admits that it's likely to be more trouble than helpful to both Enrico and the inspector.
Now we're at the house of Janet, one of the students who we just saw at the confessional. Her father leaves to go out, and she's home alone with her mom and the cat. The mysterious car that we saw earlier is waiting outside her house. Then it pulls away.
The phone rings and Janet answers it. The caller, a bearded and gloved man, identifies himself as Helen's father and asks if she can borrow Janet's Italian textbook for an exam the next day.
He's near her home, so could she just bring it out? The strange car returns, and Janet and her kitty cat run out with the book. But she sees it's not Helen's dad. The driver grabs her and pulls her into the car, and she drops her cat. He drives off, leaving the poor kitten alone, mewing on the lawn. Janet is bound with tape over her mouth in the car. The driver parks in a secluded spot and drags Janet out and across a field, holding her feet. He undresses her and then stabs her the same violent, disgusting way that Hilda was stabbed.
It's storming outside, and Elizabeth is waking from a nightmare. She's recalling what she saw the day Hilda was killed and realizes something she had missed before.
And we see a little bit more of what she saw. Hilda, with her shirt pulled open, running as a man grabs her arm.
She goes downstairs and calls Enrico, who is laying in bed with Herta. Right now, he says. Okay, I'll come. As he gets out of bed, Herta tells him it's not necessary for him to say anything.
Don't bother making up an excuse. Just go.
Enrico drives out to meet Elizabeth. She jumps into his car and tells him that she had that nightmare again, but it was clearer this time. She says she saw who was chasing Hilda. It was a man wearing a black habit, like a priest.
Now it's the next morning, and Janet's body has been discovered in that field. The police are there. The poor woman at whose house Janet was murdered is distressed that it happened there, of all places.
When Elizabeth goes to school that day, a friend immediately tells her the news of Janet's murder, and Elizabeth runs to Professor Bascombe to tell him what she knows. Bascombe takes her to his office where they can speak privately. As they go down the stairs, we see somebody watching them as a hand grips the stairwell. We don't see the face, but there's somebody there.
Now we go to a staff meeting. Headmaster Leach is complaining bitterly that a second murder throws a bad light on the school. Then Professor Bascombe and Elizabeth come in. Leach gets huffy, but Bascombe says that Elizabeth told him something that they all should hear.
She tells them all that she was there the day Hilda was killed, and she tells them what she saw.
Another teacher says, "And you're just now telling us that?" "No," says Elizabeth, and Professor Bascombe backs her up, saying that Elizabeth had already told him before she knew about Janet.
She continues that the killer wore a long black habit. In other words, a priest, offers one of the professors. "Yes," says Elizabeth. Another professor asks what she was doing in a boat. "I was with a boy," she confesses. She's asked who this boy is. He might have information that can help identify the killer, but she insists that no, he didn't see anything. He didn't even believe her. They ask if she could identify the killer, and she says maybe if she were to see him again.
Everyone in this room looks so suspicious, like they're evil.
Including an uneasy-looking Enrico because he knows that he's the boy in the boat.
Speaking of Enrico, he and Elizabeth are still at school, meeting a few steps away from the courtyard where all the students are playing. Enrico thanks Elizabeth for keeping his name out of her story. She says she'll stop by the apartment later before she goes to the police station. Then he chastely kisses her. Those two are so discreet.
Enrico turns to leave, but bumps into Professor Bascombe, who tells Enrico, don't worry, he's not going to say anything. But Enrico should be more stealthy in his extracurricular exploits with underage girls.
With underage students.
He points out Herta in the courtyard and says that Enrico should try to be more secretive for her sake. Enrico sees that Herta is speaking with Elizabeth, which is something he's not too comfortable with. And Herta looks up to see Bascombe pointing at her, and she scowls at them both. Enrico thanks Bascombe for being so understanding.
You know, this is a giallo about a girls' school. Thus, we have the obligatory gratuitous shower scene, the first of two. There's not much we learn here, except for there's a peephole in the wall of the girls' shower, through which somebody is currently watching the girls fully naked shower with each other. Ew.
But not in the shower is Elizabeth, who is instead taking a bath at the sex pad. She hears someone enter and calls out to Enrico. Only it's not Enrico. Whoever it is dressed in black, is wearing gloves, and has a key to the apartment, and goes into the bathroom and drowns Elizabeth in the bathtub. Then the killer runs out, bumping into landlord Zach Galifianakis on the lift. So instead takes the stairs to make his escape.
So now the person who was ostensibly the main character of the movie is now dead. I wonder what's going to happen next.
The police are at the flat, taking pictures of Elizabeth's wet, naked, dead body. Her body is pulled out of the bathtub and placed on a bed.
Inspector Barth is there, and so is Enrico, who says that he wasn't there when Elizabeth died. He had gone home to talk to his wife, saying that meaningfully. Barth is called away to the bedroom where Elizabeth's body has been laid out. The coroner says that preliminary results indicated that she wasn't strangled, she was drowned. In fighting her attacker, she got some hair under her fingernails, and that's been sent back to the lab for examination.
He also says that she doesn't appear to have been raped, but they will be able to better determine that after a full examination.
Barth tells Enrico that they are done there. So the police hustle Enrico down to a car as press and goppers crowd the scene. Enrico gets into one car and Barth gets into another. He's sitting with Elizabeth's uncle, Colonel Douglas Seccles. Colonel Seccles is already convinced that Enrico is the killer, and they have him in custody.
The inspector says they aren't sure about anything yet, but the colonel is sure that Professor Rosseni is guilty.
At the police station, Enrico is taken past his co-workers who are all waiting to give their statements. Headmaster Leach is there when Janet's dad comes in, and he offers his condolences. Janet's dad is not interested, though. He wants to see Janet's body, but the police have kept him waiting there. Obviously, Colonel Seccles is more important than he is, so Elizabeth's murder is going to be investigated first. Inspector Barth snaps at Janet's dad to just go home. Barth doesn't need him for questioning, so Mr. Bryant, Janet's dad, goes, but not before sniping at the staff. 3 girls at the school have been murdered. When will they accept that they have a sex maniac on the faculty? Then he goes.
Enrico is sitting in an interrogation room when someone comes in for a hair sample. They want to check it against the hair that they found under Elizabeth's fingernails to see if it's a match. In Inspector Barth's office, Colonel Seccles is trying to convince him to get Enrico to confess. The fact that he's married and has seduced an underage girl should stand for something. It does, admits Barth, but it's not proof of murder. The colonel storms off, and Barth starts to head off as well, but bumps into Herta, who asks if she can see her husband yet. Barth says they're not through with him just yet, and Herta tells him there's no way Enrico could have killed that girl. He's not a killer, much less a sex maniac. She would know. Nonetheless, look at the circumstances, says Barth. Then he excuses himself, and Barth is now questioning the members of the staff one by one.
He talks to the headmaster, who said he knew nothing about Enrico's relationship with Elizabeth, or the others for that matter. No one said anything about him and the others, points out Barth. Then he speaks with another teacher, who says that Elizabeth must have cared for Enrico. She wasn't a loose girl who would just go with anybody. Inspector Barth asks the teacher if he knows anything about the stick pins. One was found on Janet and one was found on Hilda, but this teacher knows nothing.
When questioning Mr. Newton, the chemistry teacher, Barth holds up a key and says that Enrico claims his key to the flat was taken from the locker room. A key just like this.
Newton doesn't know anything about that, but says he knew something was up with Enrico. He never liked that Italian.
Then when questioning Bascombe, Bascombe tells Barth Elizabeth's story that Hilda's killer wore a black habit, like a priest.
Really has to drag it out of him, too, because first Bascombe says that he can understand why Enrico had an affair. Herta is a cold and distant woman. It's no wonder a hot-blooded man like Enrico looked elsewhere. Anyway, Enrico had no reason to kill Elizabeth. We all knew what she saw. She told the whole staff.
And this is the first that Barth has heard about this particular clue. Barth goes to the room where Enrico is being held. What's this about a priest, he asks. Without looking up, Enrico tells him what Elizabeth had said about her dream, the night Janet Bryant was killed. An exasperated Barth returns to his office where he receives the coroner's report. The hair they examined from Elizabeth's crime scene didn't belong to Rosseni. It was dead hair, and Elizabeth hadn't been sexually assaulted. In fact, she was still a virgin.
Barth is surprised by that.
We were all surprised by that.
Now the cops are pulling up to the scene of Elizabeth's murder. They find the landlord and tell him to get dressed and come to the station, where he's made to look at a lineup of men in a variety of priestly fashions so that he can say exactly which denomination of priest he bumped into. He wigs out and says that he has no way to know. A priest is a priest is a priest.
Barth pulls him up by the collar and asks, nay, demands if there's anything else he can identify.
He must know something.
He had a beard, says the landlord. Barth goes to the phone. He makes a call and asks if the hair they found might have come from a beard. Sure, only it would have to be a false beard because it was dead hair.
Barth tells the sergeant to keep going at the landlord, and then goes back to where the staff was sitting and wakes up Father Weber, who's still waiting to be interviewed. He asks Father Weber if he's ever seen a bearded priest around the school or the church. Weber doesn't think so Barth sends him home, along with the porter who was also waiting. And in a very short but funny scene, we see the landlord exiting Scotland Yard, and he is pissed. He hates the police, and he can't find a cab.
Now Inspector Barth is speaking with Herta. Barth says that yesterday Enrico was late in meeting with Elizabeth because he went to speak with Herta first.
He asks if she and Enrico did have that talk, the one about their marriage. Herta says that she didn't give him a chance to talk because she didn't want to know what he had to say. Barth says, oh, but you did know, and then you left before he did. Where'd you go?
Herta asks why that's important, and instead of answering, Barth changes the subject, saying that Enrico has been exonerated and will be released soon. Herta smiles, but he just one more things her. He tells Herta that Elizabeth was still a virgin, and Herta is overcome with joy at this news.
It really set it up like Herta might be the murderer, and then they just completely dropped that ball. Outside the station, Enrico is glumly walking home. Herta drives by and toots her horn. Herta now has a loose bun with romantic tendrils framing her face, and she has done her makeup. There are tears in her eyes as she stares at Enrico. Neither say anything as he gets in the car beside her. They get home, and we find out apparently Enrico is out of a job.
Herta asks him what he expected the headmaster to do when he found out Enrico had been arrested. Enrico asks what she had said to Elizabeth that day in the courtyard. Herta says that she had wanted to confront her, but she chickened down and could only tell her to keep up with her homework. Enrico says the two of them have been distracted, but now it's time to work on their relationship. Herta is happy to hear this, but Enrico says there's just one thing. He has to find out who killed Elizabeth. Herta says she wants to know too, and she'll help in any way she can.
Herta vows to be the tuppence to his Tommy, the Nora to his Nick, the Mrs. Hart to his Mr. Hart. It looks like this marriage might be saved after all. Aw.
Now Herta is in her classroom addressing the girls who have a lot of questions. Like, did Professor Rosseni really get arrested? But Herta says she has some questions for them as well, as does Inspector Barth, who enters and asks if any of the girls have seen a priest with a beard. They say 2 or 3 times. Brenda says he was in the confessional at Hilda's funeral, and both she and Janet had taken confession with him.
Barth wants to know what Brenda told him. The girls all titter, and Barth realizes his mistake. He can't ask that. Then he asks if they ever saw Hilda confess to this mystery priest. Brenda says she didn't know if Hilda ever did, but Janet definitely unburdened herself to this man.
Now we see Enrico and Herta walking on a bridge across the river from the Parliament building. Herta says that Enrico's suspicions were correct. Some of the girls had formed a secret society. In questioning the girls, she says that Brent is a sly one and Helen seems frightened, but she did find out that Hilda and Janet were dating some older boys, and she's found out one of their names, Phil Sullivan.
He's a boy from the university. Enrico takes over the investigation. He's going to visit somebody who lives on a houseboat. The boat's door is answered by a naked girl covered in white paint. He says he's a friend of Phil's, so she lets him in. Phil comes upstairs with his camera gear, and we find out he's a photographer, and the naked white girl is his subject. Enrico wants to talk to Phil about Janet and Hilda, but Phil has to keep doing this shoot because his model's about to leave.
As he continues to take pictures, Phil tells Enrico that some of the girls were popular with the older crowd because they knew the score, meaning they put out. He starts listing names including Hilda and Janet, Helen, and Solange.
But not Elizabeth. He says they all played around, even with each other sometimes, but they never went all the way, not after what happened to Solange.
Phil takes a few more pictures and turns to find that Enrico has gone. Phil goes outside where Enrico is waiting, and Phil asks him what is it he really wants to know. Just one thing, says Enrico. Who is Solange? Phil says she's nobody, he was just using her as an example. Enrico strong-arms Phil,
literally,
who says she was just a wild girl, half French, a real swinger, but he never did anything with her.
He says that she was in the first form, but when Enrico can't place her at his school, Phil says it must have been a different high school. He doesn't know, but Solange thought that she was a big deal. Phil's model breaks up the arm twisting, and Enrico has to leave.
Barth is visiting the school again, this time specifically the chapel, to ask about the bearded priest.
Father Herbert steps out of the shadows to say that he hears all the confessions of the girls. No other priest would be doing it.
And he doesn't bring in outside help to hear confessions.
When Barth asks if it's possible that another priest came in to listen to confessions, Herbert says that anything is possible, but he's confident that another priest didn't use the other confessional during the Mass. I see, says Barth.
Now we're at a double funeral for Janet and Elizabeth. Someone hands Helen a note. She reads it and passes it to Brenda. Herta is in attendance, and Enrico is there too, but he's not welcome, so he's hiding in the bushes. As the crowd disperses, Enrico approaches some of the girls, specifically Helen, Brenda, and Susan. Apparently, the note was from him. He asks them about their friend, Solange. They claim not to know of her, and continue on their way.
Bascombe arrives to shoo Enrico off. If he's to uphold his claim to not be a sex maniac, he should go. But before Enrico goes, he heaps some praise on Herta for being his rock, and then she comes up to them, beaming at her husband.
Back at home, Herta makes some phone calls, trying to find this Solange. Her research has narrowed it down to 2 possibilities, but one is still in grade school, so I guess that really narrows it down to 1. Another, Solange Beauregard, had been attending the school, but hadn't re-enrolled this past semester. That must be her then, says Enrico, and Herta tells him that she lives on James Street.
Enrico wants to head right there, but Herta begs him to stay, and they embrace. Now we're outside the Rosseni apartment building. It's night, and Brenda stealthily enters the lobby and stuffs a note into the Rosseni mailbox. After that, she rides her bike to Janet's house. That strange car is following her, but she spots a policeman passing by, so the car drives off, leaving her safe, for now.
The next morning, the Rossenis leave separately, without getting their mail. As Herta heads to work, Enrico tells her that he's going to look for Solange. Enrico goes to the house on James Street, but finds that the Beauregards no longer reside there. The current tenant, Diane, doesn't know the Beauregards, but she does supply the name of the rental agency. Enrico returns home and picks up the mail on his way to his flat. A small card falls from the stack of mail as he heads upstairs. As he enters his flat, the phone rings. Enrico answers. The caller won't identify himself, he just says he's a friend from Italy. But he does warn Enrico that Enrico should stop digging around if he wants to ensure his wife's safety.
Then Enrico calls the leasing agency, but they're closed till Monday morning. Back in the lobby, we see that someone else has picked up the note and opened it to read it. The note says, Ruth Holden knows everything, and gives her address.
Enrico starts to head out again, but the doorman stops him, handing him that note and telling him that he had dropped it from that morning's mail.
Then he stares creepily as Enrico drives away. Enrico drives through the country to a home, which we saw in the opening. This is Ruth Holden's house. He calls for her, no answer, and then he goes to the side door. There's no one answering that door either. so he goes exploring the grounds, where he finds the body of a dog with a bloody head and a shovel with blood on it.
Enrico continues to look around and finds Ruth Holden's body on the ground, apparently dead of a massive head wound.
She also has a scythe inserted in her vagina. Enrico turns and vomits.
Inspector Barth arrives at the scene and asks Enrico if he has any idea who might have left him that note. Enrico does not.
Enrico says it must have been one of the second-form girls, but doesn't know which one. Enrico says that Barth should have them all watched, and Barth says he is having them watched.
And he's not the only one. The girls are in the shower again, and once again the peeper is watching him through that hole.
Helen and Brenda are whispering. Helen is scared and wants to tell the police. Brenda grabs her by the hair and reminds her that they swore never to tell. So Helen agrees to remain silent, if she lives long enough.
We pull back to see that the creeper is Mr. Newton, the chemistry teacher. He leaves his post and wipes the drool from his mouth.
The sweat from his brow.
He bumps into Inspector Barth outside, who asks him where he might find some of the girls. He wants to ask them a few questions.
Newton all but confesses to peeping, but Barth lets him scurry off anyway. Then the girls emerge from the school fully dressed with bone-dry hair. Explain that one. It's only been a few minutes. Herta springs up to ask Brenda, Helen, and Susan if they know Ruth Holden, and they deny it.
And Barth pops on over to ask why they answered no to that question. He zeroes in on Brenda. She was your maid for several years, wasn't she? Brenda apologizes. Oh, you must mean Tata. She knew her as Tata and says she forgot her name was Ruth.
And Tata had been her maid practically since she was born. Now Herta and Enrico are picnicking in the park. Enrico thinks that the police are treating him like a child. And then he laments the lost girls who had secret boyfriends. And they were probably into drugs, too. And the way they dismiss poor Ruth Holden. This generation, you know?
Herta kicks off her shoes and lays down with him on the blanket.
She says they just need to find Solange, and then they'll know everything.
Just then a girl walks past, staring down at them. Enrico sits up as the girl is being chased by her caretaker. Slow down. Do you want to give me a heart attack? Oh, Solange.
Oh, yet another misdirect. And now our mystery man makes a phone call to Brenda and tells her that she needs to come to Battersea Amusement Park tomorrow. He'll be there. If you fail to come, the police will be there, he says, and Brenda looks alarmed.
Next we see Barth in his office in front of a map telling his officers where they should stand in plainclothes. They're planning a trap for the killer at Battersea Amusement Park because somehow they're in on this too.
I don't know how they knew. They're at the park next to the amusement park. This is all very confusing. So now it's the next day. Brenda, Helen, and Susan go to the amusement park. Brenda goes off by herself and spots Solange on the merry-go-round. She tries to talk to her, but Solange is non-responsive. Still, Brenda gets her to come with her into the park where the plainclothes police are patrolling. Helen and Susan start to look for Brenda, and they can't find her. Helen and Susan realize that while they were doing go-karts, they lost track of Brenda, so they go looking for her.
The police are all keeping their eyes on them, including that undercover Joe D'Amato. Helen goes to a plainclothesman dressed as a priest and asks if he'd seen two girls come this way. Yes, he says, they went that way. He turns and sees a black car driving away, and the girls are nowhere in sight. A look of panic comes over him as he realizes he sucks at his job.
In the police station, Inspector Barth debriefs them. The car that was driving away had one priest in it, says one cop who was watching it. He thought it was one of their men. Another cop says they have roadblocks up, so that car won't get far. Barth leaves, and outside the room comforts Brenda's distraught parents. And for some reason, Enrico is there.
Then Professor Bascombe appears to report that his daughter, Solange, is missing. He provides a picture of her, and Barth has the sergeant, who had been dressed as the priest, identify her as the girl walking with Brenda.
Then Barth takes the picture, and he and Enrico walk off. For some reason, Enrico is fixated on the fact that Solange Beauregard has a different last name than Professor Bascombe, and Barth explains Solange's traumatic infantile regression and snaps that she was born to a married woman. That's why she has another last name.
Then Barth, Enrico, and Herta go with Bascombe to his house, where Bascombe shows them where Solange's abductor apparently broke in. He shows them where the door had been pried open and the wall scratched. Everyone takes a quick look around. Enrico takes notice of a book on the shelf, and Barth finds one of those green-headed pins on the shelf.
Bascombe tells Barth that since Solange's trauma, he's kept her close, and Barth tells him to stay by the phone. They're going out, and he will call when they find her. Herta offers to stay, but Bascombe would rather be left alone.
As Enrico and Herta drive away, Herta comments that Bascombe managed to keep Solange a secret from everyone, except the killer. And as they drive off, Enrico has Herta confirm that Solange had never advanced beyond first form.
Now we find ourselves in an attic, where Solange is wandering around and Brenda is imprisoned, tied up. The killer is there and says that Solange can't speak, so Brenda must, and untapes her mouth so that she can finally divulge what they have done to Solange. In a sepia-toned flashback, we see all the girls riding their bikes to Tata's house, just like in the open.
But when they arrived, a fight broke out. Elizabeth and Hilda told Solange not to go through with it, but the others won and brought Solange in to see Ruth Holden. "What did you do to Solange?" asked Brenda's captor. Brenda explains how Solange was laid out on a table while the girls held her down.
Solange says, "You're not going to hurt me, are you, Tata?" And Tata says if she does, Solange deserves it. She strips off Solange's underwear. Tada tells her to think about screwing and grit her teeth, then performs an abortion with a sterile knitting needle. And Solange screams in agony.
Back in the attic, the killer rips off Brenda's shirt and throws it in the incinerator. Meanwhile, Enrico and Herta have gone to the Bryant's home. Herta asks if Enrico is sure about this. Enrico says that if he wasn't, he wouldn't be here. Back in the attic, the killer tells Brenda that Hilda had told him a little that day in the confessional, but Janet was the one who really spilled her guts. She told him nearly everything, in the booth and just before he killed her.
Back at Janet's house, we see that her cat is okay. I was relieved to see that. As Enrico rifles through her stuff, he's looking for her Italian book, but he can't find it.
He confirms with Janet's mother that no one removed any books from the room. Then he and Herta rush off again. Back in the attic, the killer tells Brenda that she's the last one.
Brenda is naked and bound and lying on the floor. Solange is wandering around and she finds a knife, like the one we saw when Hilda was attacked.
Enrico and Herta have Inspector Barth meet them at Bascombe's house. They ring the buzzer, but nobody answers. Enrico tells Barth about the book. If this missing book were to be found inside, it would certainly implicate Bascombe in the crimes. But Barth can't go in and search without a warrant. But as an unemployed professor, Enrico need not be held to such standards, so he busts into the room and pulls the book from the shelf. See? Told ya. Solange never got to second form, and this same book should be at Janet's house, but isn't.
Good job, Scooby Gang. Barth gets on the phone to call all patrols to be on the lookout for, and then he stops talking, and eerie music plays as Solange creeps into the room. Barth hangs up speechless.
Herta goes to her. You're Solange, aren't you? Where's your father?
Just then, Bascombe returns from shopping and is shocked to see everyone there. Then he turns around and is shocked, or pretends to be shocked, to see Solange. She's been found. He's so shocked he drops the apples that he had bought. He embraces her and asks Barth how he found her.
She sort of found us, Mr. Bascombe, says Barth. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions? And Barth, Bascombe, and Enrico go into another room.
Alone with Solange, Herta finds herself being dragged upstairs. She goes into her room and spots the fake beard, the habit, and some gloves. She shrieks and starts calling out for Barth.
Barth runs to her aid while Enrico stays to keep an eye on Bascombe, who sits down behind his desk. Barth and Herta explore further down the hallway and find Brenda's naked body on the floor and start to try to revive her. In the other room, Bascombe opens the desk drawer and pulls on a gun. No, shouts Enrico. The gun goes off and Barth and Herta rush back to see that Bascombe has shot himself in the head.
But why, asks Enrico. Barth explains about the secret club and the pins and the sex party and the abortion. Bascombe found out what happened via the fake priest get-up and confessions, then killed the girls in a manner that mirrored what happened to Solange. Solange creeps into frame and sees her dead dad and cries, I guess. Her expression changes very little. And then we freeze frame on her confused face, the credits roll, and that's the end.
This is the American International Podcast, where we're discussing The School That Couldn't Scream from 1972.
Originally titled What Have You Done to Solange? Or Cosa Avete Fatta a Solange, The School That Couldn't Scream was a co-production between the Italian companies Italian International Films, SRL, Claudia Cinematografica, Constantin Film, and West German studio Rialto Film.
The School That Couldn't Scream was filmed in London, England, with locations on the Chelsea Harbour Embankment, Kensington, Rutland Gardens, New Scotland Yard, and outside Buckingham Palace. Several interior shots were filmed in Italy. Filming took place from September through November 1971.
The School That Couldn't Scream was very loosely based on a novel called The Clue of the New Pin by Edgar Wallace, although the film differs significantly from the story in the book, which had already been made into a British B-movie crime feature back in 1961. Cast members Joachim Fuchsberger and Karin Baal each had appeared in several 1960s Edgar Wallace adaptations produced by Rialto Film.
In Germany, the film was released under the name The Clue of the New Pin, or rather the unpronounceable to us German translation of that title. Author and film historian Kim Newman said in the DVD commentary that the producers relied on the tie-in with the Edgar Wallace book to market School That Couldn't Scream to a German audience as part of the popular creamy film genre.
In order to market the film to an English-speaking audience, the production team decided that the actors would say their lines only in English, no matter their nationality or accent. This meant the English looping coincided so well with the lip movements of the actors that no one in the U.S. noticed that the film had been dubbed. Karin Baal said in an interview for the DVD release to What Have You Done to Solange that Fabio Testi didn't learn his lines in English and had to use a prompter hidden on set to mouth his lines, not speaking them at all.
Camille Keaton, who plays Solange, was American, a distant relative of actor Buster Keaton. However, she has almost no dialogue in the film. In an interview, Keaton said, "Well, I met this gentleman on a flight, and he started talking to me. He told me he was an Italian director, and his name was Massimo Dallamano. I then went into Italian director Zeffirelli's office to take some photographs. I later received a call from the director on the flight, who had done a film called The Portrait of Dorian Gray. He had seen the photographs I had taken before, and he said he wanted me to be the main character Solange in the film." Keaton has also said that she was chosen due to her frail appearance and was ordered not to tan during the shoot.
As What Have You Done to Solange, the film was released in March of 1972 in West Germany and Italy. Under the title Terror in the Woods, a Hallmark subsidiary, Newport Films, released it in America in May of 1976 on a double bill with Don't Open the Window in many markets. It was reissued as The School That Couldn't Scream in 1977. In Italy, the film was one of the highest-grossing gialli in the 1971 to 1972 season, grossing 846 million Italian lira.
Taglines for the film, as released as Terror in the Woods, include What Every Young Girl Fears,
Suspense and Terror.
They tampered with nature, now they must pay the price.
And for The School That Couldn't Scream, the tagline was, A True Story. In 1965, 5 schoolgirls were murdered. Today, the students still walk the corridors of this school in terror.
We were only able to find contemporary reviews from secondhand sources. The German newspaper Hamburger Abendblatt found the film to be too broad, but said that the quality acting from Karin Baal, Fabio Testi, Joachim Fuchsberger, and Günther Stoll enhanced the film. An Italian newspaper, La Stampa, also said the acting of Fabio Testi, Joachim Fuchsberger, and Karin Baal was praiseworthy, and the director Dallamano developed the mystery in the story well.
As for modern reviews, all fall under the title What Have You Done to Solange, mostly for the DVD release. David Brooke of Blueprint Review wrote, What Have You Done to Solange is maybe too beautiful looking to call gritty, but it's shot more naturally than a lot of giallo, and the grim and controversial subject matter helped knock the sheen off. DOP Aristide Massacesi, also known as Joan D'Amato, and director Massimo Dallamano, who was the DOP on A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, craft a classily well-shot film. It doesn't have the theatrical use of primary colored lighting or elaborate camera angles and movements, other than 1 or 2 moments, that many giallo revel in. Instead, it uses thoughtful framing and composition, alongside some attractive, fairly natural lighting.
Christopher Houts in the Happy Goat Horror blog writes, What Have You Done to Solange is a stone-cold classic, and if you're not already watching it, you're seriously missing out. What really sets Solange apart from other gialli is its emotional weight. This isn't just a whodunit with a body count. The film digs deep into its characters, exploring the darker, more sordid side of desire, guilt, and repressed emotions. It's a film that's as much about the psychological unraveling of its characters as it is about the bloody murders.
Richard Scheib in his Moria review blog writes, One of the reasons What Have You Done to Solange stands out is that it has a much better script than almost any other giallo you care to name, the works of Argento and Bavo included. As a rule, giallo films tend to regard plots as a necessary evil and not place a great deal of effort into them, but this is not the case here. The script does come with a number of sharply effective twists, the setting of Cristina Galbó up as a romantic lead, and then her abrupt killing off about a third of the way in, followed by a tightly constructed series of twists where lead Fabio Testi becomes the principal suspect. The film also arrives at a much stronger motivating reason for the killer than any other giallo, one that also ties into Catholic themes.
Video Librarian's review said Solange is considered a classic of the Italian horror genre known as giallo, but for all the characteristic sloppiness of the screenplay, this film remains unusual and surprising, with some well-directed murder scenes and startling imagery. The review also called it shamelessly salacious in its exploitation of girls as sexual objects, and unsavory in that these minors are assaulted in a vicious, sadistic, and hateful manner. The extreme violence against young women makes it hard to enjoy.
What Have You Done to Solange was the first in a series of 3 loosely connected films in what is now called the Schoolgirls in Peril series. In 1974, Dallamano followed Solange with What Have They Done to Your Daughters, a film with themes similar to those in What Have They Done to Solange. The final part of the series was Red Rings of Fear, released in 1978. Dallamano is credited as a screenwriter on the film and was to direct, but he died before the film began production, and Alberto Negrin helmed the movie instead.
In 2007, the Olympia Washington Film Festival staged an event called All Freakin' Night that featured, among other events, a screening of The School That Couldn't Scream. Host Joe Fisher said of School, For the last movie, we try to do something different or weird. It's nightmarish and not really heavy on the logic. It's a tripped-out, very Italian 70s kind of craziness.
In 2016, Ken W. Hanley of Fangoria.com reported that director Nicholas Winding Refn announced that he was planning a remake of What Have You Done to Solange and was seeking a director and screenwriter for the project, and that Fulvio Lucisano would co-produce. But as of 2025, nothing seems to ever have come of that.
So, Cheryl, The School That Couldn't Scream is the first giallo we've done on the podcast. There will be a few more.
Oh, good. Actually, I really like this genre.
I do too. They're really kind of strange movies, though.
They're gothic, baroque even, in the manner of the crime, the way that it's filmed, and the acting is very over the top. Everything is just so extra in these movies.
Well, the acting in this case, you have a bunch of actors who aren't speaking their native language because they shot it in English.
Right. The DVD has some really good extras, but the funniest one is Karin Ball's, where we find out she is just a stuck-up prude who hated basically everything about this movie. And then she tells us about Fabio Testi mouthing his lines instead of saying them. And she just had to watch his face and guess when it was her turn to talk. That was really funny. All this because he was too lazy to learn them in English.
I believe that this was shot in Italian and English. I don't think it was solely in English. And there are two versions because we watched the School That Couldn't Scream version, which we bought through Sinister Cinema, which was about 3 minutes shorter than the full What Have They Done to Solange that is currently available from Arrow Video.
Which is a much better print. Having to reduce the quality so much to watch the AIP cut was so distressing. It was blown up. The credits didn't even appear in full on the screen. The print was awful. It was so washed out. And there were no subtitles, just so we could make sure that we were hearing exactly what was said.
And one thing that I did notice, though, was that in comparing the two, the note that the doorman gives Enrico that he had dropped, it's written in Italian on the Blu-ray, but the School That Couldn't Scream print, that was written in English.
Another thing I noticed was when they were passing around the crime scene photos in the headmaster's office, they actually showed the one with a knife in her vagina.
Well, there were several instances where there was extra violence in the longer version. Or nudity that was cut from the print that we screened for our recap.
I know they cut at least one scene in its entirety. It was one of the bushy-haired landlord bumping into a priest as he's wandering home from being interrogated and then screaming and running down the alley. It was really funny.
That was just a continuation of the scene where he couldn't find a cat.
Right. But it seems for the most part, they're just cutting out some of the more prurient elements of the original. We don't see the shot of the knife in her vagina. We don't see as much of the nudity during the first sex scene where they're on the river in the boat. They just trim little bits here and there to get the time down by a few minutes.
Yeah, it wound up being a difference of 2.5 to 3 minutes in just those little cuts.
Usually when they make cuts like that, they might even cut out as much as a whole reel. And I think that was the case for one of the theatrical releases that this movie had, that many more cuts were made. At least that's what I heard.
Like a lot of Italian cinema, logic is thrown out the window. These movies take place in kind of an alternate universe where time doesn't actually flow the same way.
Where your hair can be sopping wet 1 minute and bone dry 2 minutes later.
And the way they piece the case together based upon what they have, you're like, well, how did they get there?
Well, what's weird about this movie is that it becomes an entirely different movie when they finally start dealing with the title character. It takes almost 2/3 of the movie before her name even comes up. By that time, there have been 3 murders, and we have no idea that it's because of Solange until he stumbles upon one guy who slept with these girls who brings up her name. It just seems like it's by happenstance and not even plotted that way.
Well, the whole movie's by happenstance. The fact that Enrico notices that book on the shelf, doesn't say anything, goes to check out Janet's house, doesn't find it there, so okay, mystery solved in his eyes.
Right. It's a very tenuous connection, and one that any lawyer could have thrown out.
And even the police methods, okay, let's bring in this guy who saw a priest and have him identify the priest's uniform, so at least we know what denomination we're looking for.
Well, that didn't work. And then the fact that Enrico becomes deputized to help with this investigation, that was just amazing. He's always at the police station. I guess he doesn't have a job, so he needs a hobby. But why did Barth, who has a full complement of officers and other staff, just say, now this is a buddy picture and Enrico is my buddy cop? It makes no sense.
And they do say they're going to keep an eye on the girls at the school. And when Brenda is called to go to the amusement park, somehow the police know about it, so they're staking out the area.
Did she tell them?
Were they listening in on her phone calls?
Maybe, but we don't know that.
And they almost had to have been, because that's really creepy if they're just peeking in the windows and,
listening.
Oh, I guess we're going to the amusement park tomorrow.
They bugged her place. Maybe she told them.
I don't think she would have told them, because she was the sly one who wasn't talking.
But there's a lot of stuff that happens off screen, too. When Herta is telling Enrico everything that she sussed out from the girls, where she found out about the secret society, which particular girls were involved, the sex, the name of the older boy, it all happened off screen. We don't see any of that. They did trim a little bit from the scene where Herta is addressing the girls. They have a bunch of questions for her that she never answers, and she has questions for them that we never hear.
Well, because Barth comes in and interrupts her.
Right. That would have been more integral to the plot, to the movie, if we had been privy to that. But I guess it saved time just to have her relay what she found to Enrico. The way that Herta changes through this movie is probably my favorite thing about it. At the beginning, she's the aggrieved wife. Her husband's cheating on her. She's this severe German matron with no makeup and her hair tightly pulled back. She's always sniping at her husband. They don't even ride to work together. And then midway through, after she finds out the young girl that her husband had a dalliance with was technically a virgin. I mean, anything else could have happened. She's suddenly converted. Now she loves him. She wants to work on her marriage. She softens her look, puts on makeup, pulls her hair into little tendrils around her face. She's dressing more romantically, and she's partnering up with her cheating husband to solve this crime so that they can get on with their lives. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it makes the movie fun.
Yeah, she didn't make a lot of sense as a character, but she's probably the most believable character in the movie, despite her own logic. I mean, I can't imagine most women being that forgiving in the first place. And in the second, I don't know if solving a crime is the best way to mend your marriage, but it worked for them.
It did work for them. Although the end of the movie kind of throws into question what's going to happen to Solange, who now apparently has no parents, no ability to communicate with the outside world, and seems to have glommed on to Herta as her new savior. Are they going to adopt her?
I think Solange is kind of a creepy kid.
Very much so. Once she finally appears, she's just wandering through the movie with her finger in her mouth. I think they might have gone a little bit overboard on what they'd done to Solange for the purposes of this movie. I mean, yes, a back alley abortion is very traumatic. I mean, I would guess.
Well, we don't know if Solange is alone. She did have a caretaker at the park, but she'd vanished.
Maybe she got fired because she lost her for a bit.
Technically, Bascombe picked her up, so...
The caretaker?
No, Bascombe picked Solange up with Brenda and took her back home. So we don't know what happened to the caretaker. She just left at the park, I guess.
Well, he probably did fire her because it was inconvenient to his plan to murder somebody in their house. If she was a live-in caretaker, which she must have been because Bascombe went to work, she probably had to be let go. She knew too much. And her presence in the house would be inconvenient when you plan on stabbing a girl in the vagina in your attic.
Bascombe's MO gets really weird and complicated toward the end because you have to think that he probably let Solange go out to the park. Was he using her as bait? I guess he was.
It didn't work, though, because...
It did, because he got Brenda.
Oh, I thought you meant the park where Enrico and Herta were picnicking, where they spot her.
No, I meant the amusement park.
Because that was weird. We got to find Solange, and then Solange is just there peering over them, and they exhibit no curiosity about this strange girl. Like, why is she there? This movie sets up so many misdirects.
It does. When Elizabeth goes to Bascombe to tell him what she knows, and they go downstairs, and there's some mysterious figure standing at the top of the stairs looking at them.
It's just the porter who's also some kind of creep because he was staring in through the keyhole at the very first meeting when they found out about Hilda being dead. And then the way they set up Herta as being Elizabeth's murderer. For one thing, it's a completely different MO than the way Hilda and Janet were killed.
The way Elizabeth was killed, yeah.
And for another thing, Hilda has no alibi for this time, and she never even has to give one, or she doesn't provide one. And Barth is just staring at her like, well, I really want you to do is to tell me that you weren't in the apartment drowning your husband's mistress. And instead, he just completely backs off that. He's like, oh, by the way, your hubby is innocent and didn't screw that girl. So you can go, and he can too.
The second time through, I was still not convinced that she hadn't committed that one murder.
I know.
Because I didn't think Bascombe had that much motivation. But I guess there was, in that even if she wasn't one of the ones who dragged Solange into the abortion, she tried to stop it. But she did witness a murder, so he had a reason to kill her. It could explain why he killed her differently, because she wasn't involved in the abortion process.
Right. But does anybody tell us that? No. That's for you to figure out on your own.
I mean, that's the only reason that it makes sense that she was killed in a different manner.
Because it seems like they really stop investigating what happened to the girls. The movie is primarily concerned with Solange at that point.
The police aren't necessarily investigating the murder. They're just trying to prevent others from happening.
Right. They need to find Brenda because she vanished. And apparently so did this Solange girl that they know nothing about.
And another thing, after having Solange go to the parks to pick up Brenda, he goes to the police station and reports her missing. Nobody even knows she exists at this point. So what's the advantage in him doing that?
I don't know, except to maybe throw off any suspicion that might come his way for being the murderer.
I don't think there was any suspicion.
No.
He was just a guy at this. I mean, as much as any of the professors at the school were under suspicion, but
if she was really missing, he would have a motive to do that. If he really didn't know where she was. And I don't think that's true. I think he's just pretending to be surprised that she gets found.
Oh, I think so too. We see her with Brenda before that.
Do we though? She's wandering around, but do we actually see her and Brenda in the same frame ever?
He has Brenda, and Brenda and Solange were together when Brenda disappeared, so it makes sense that he brought both of them home.
But maybe while he was tying up Brenda, then Solange wandered away? I don't think that happened. I'm just saying it could be a thing that happened.
It's just another thing trying to throw the audience off track. That's the only reason it's there. It only works a little bit because it's one of those wacky Italian films. If this was made in America, it would never fly.
No, that's not the way we behave. But foreigners, who can tell?
The whole timetable of the movie is kind of weird. Did they confirm that Solange went to a different school? Because no adults know of her existence. Some of the students do, but only some.
Yeah, they never established that. I think that she went to their school, but maybe she was so quiet they just forgot about her. There were many girls in that bicycle riding sequence that opened the movie that we don't see again, really.
We see them in the shower.
We see them in the shower, but they're not.
So we see a lot of them, actually.
Well, we see all of them, but no, they're not characters, though. So there was more to this club than just, who is it? Helen, Elizabeth, Hilda, Susan, Brenda, Janet. I have 6.
I think it's everybody.
Right, but there are more girls on that bike riding scene in the opening of the movie.
Maybe 1 or 2, but there's not a lot more. That's most of them.
Another drop plot element were those green pins. Number 1, there's only 3 of them. And number 2, why didn't they ever spot them on any of the girls who are still alive? They only find them on the missing or dead girls. So how do they even come to know what this meant? They're only there to connect it to that book title, and the book plot has nothing to do with girls or school. It's about an eccentric millionaire.
And somehow Inspector Barth is the one who uncovered the meaning of these pins, but I can't see the girls coming clean and saying, oh, that's because we have these sex parties.
No, but somehow Herta got that out of them, because she's not a cop and she's not a man.
No, Herta didn't. Inspector Barth was the one who knew about the pins.
I just meant the sex party. She's the one that figured out the secret club.
Right.
Because they must trust her more than they trust a man who's a cop.
So did Barth just see the commonality between they all were wearing these pins but didn't know the significance?
Well, it's not even all. He only found 2 pins. Then finally at the very end, he finds the 3rd one.
Elizabeth wasn't wearing one because she was in the bath. But was she in that club because she wasn't sleeping around either? She was a virgin, so she might not have been one of those.
I just wanted to say that the pins are brought up, but then they don't really explore it very much. So all in all, a lot of places where the script let the viewer do the work instead of establishing things for us, which I don't normally mind, but in this movie, a lot of things they should have mentioned, they just don't.
Well, again, it's because it's Italian and they don't necessarily feel the need to tie up all their loose ends or have it make sense.
Just like Lost.
So it can be a little more difficult to follow, but that's kind of what you expect from these kind of films. So you just know it's going to be weird going into it.
Do you think that this is one of the top 10 giallo ever produced?
I think it's a pretty good movie, and I think it works as a giallo, but I think it seems a little gentle as a giallo. It's not very bloody.
The crimes are extremely violent. They are extremely graphic.
But they could have been a lot more explicit, too. They were
very explicit, just not very bloody, not gory.
Well, no, they cut away all the time. Like, they show the thrust, but you don't see the penetration
you do
ever.
In the picture.
So they show them in the stills, yeah, when they're just laying there with implements pointing up out of them. When Elizabeth has that dream, we see the knife being thrust, and she has the reaction as she's waking up from her nightmare, which is a very graphic way of doing it. But it's not a direct result of the crime unless you go to the theory that all these girls are somehow psychically connected, because Brenda says that she knew that Hilda was dead. And Elizabeth wakens from that nightmare at apparently the same point where Janet is murdered.
That just could be a trick of the filmmaker. I don't think that she really knew.
Well, I think it is. But as I said, if you're going to read that into it, that these girls are psychically connected, that would be examples of it. But I don't personally think that's something that you can do.
I don't think you can either. And Brenda just knew that Hilda wasn't the type to stay out all night, so she was missing, and something was very wrong. I think that that's how you can interpret that. And Elizabeth had been moping about this crime ever since she saw what she saw, and it's always on her mind. So the fact that she's having this nightmare and a thunderstorm wakes her up at the same moment that Janet's being killed is just a coincidence. And those are the only 2 connections you could even find. I wouldn't go to the supernatural here. One review that I didn't quote, but it said that this was more of a German creamy married to an Italian giallo, where they have elements from the one type of movie and elements from the other type blended together. And that's why there's no bright colors and blood everywhere. It's more about the crime-solving element of it and not so much about the horrific murders. So that kind of made sense to me.
Yeah, I can see that. Like I said, it doesn't seem like a pure giallo.
No, and it's not even a pure Italian production. It's Italian-German, so that makes perfect sense.
So, Cheryl, are you ready to rate The School That Couldn't Scream? And doing so using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
Yes to both. I really like this movie. I did just pick it apart, I know, for all the plot holes, but I actually really enjoyed watching this. For me, it was a pretty compelling mystery, and we don't really see the knife going in, but in my mind, I do see the knife going in. I just imagine myself as one of those girls and what's happening, and it's almost the most horrific thing I could imagine. And so it was very affecting to me, and wanting to find out the murderer and being invested in these characters. I do think that they could have made the girls a little more prominent in the movie, and instead we just have the crime fighting team that forms in the middle of the movie of Enrico and Herta, and they go solve the mystery. But before that, I do wish they had established a little bit more of who these girls are and a little more of their backstory. But even so, I'm still kind of invested in them once I figured out which one was which, because there's a lot of them. I just want their murderer to be caught. It was started to become important to me. So this is a really good movie. Maybe it's not the best giallo, but it's a good movie, and I want to give it an A. What do you think?
When you mention the violence not being shown and that it's all in your head, that's actually a much more effective way to convey the violence. If you see it, you go, ugh, and you move on. But if you think it, it sticks with you a little bit harder and a little bit longer. And it's a lot more effective that way. I don't think this necessarily works as a procedural because the logic in it is so lacking. But as a whodunit, you really have no idea. When Bascombe comes in and says, okay, my daughter's missing, it's kind of weird that he has this daughter that nobody knows about, but you don't suspect him of being the murderer just yet. It seems kind of weird that he seems to be a victim all of a sudden when he has this daughter that nobody knew about. But you sit in for the rest of the movie and you let it play out. And this isn't one you can necessarily look back on and find clues that you missed because there were clues they didn't give you. They say, oh yeah, this happened. You didn't see it though. Like when Enrico is looking through the bookshelf, you can kind of see he notices something. You really notice it on the second watch, but he makes no allusion to there being a second form book on a bookshelf where nobody has taken a second form class. So stringing together these seemingly unrelated incidents, it seems like they're just grasping at straws, but somehow they come up with the answer eventually.
Well, that's probably why they had to have the amateurs help them investigate. They would have got nowhere on their own.
Well, that's true. If Enrico wasn't butting into the investigation every opportunity, they probably never would have solved it.
To be fair, they didn't seem to mind.
Well, he was helpful. It just seems weird that he was cleared so easily. I mean, we know he didn't do it because we saw the first murder and he was there, but not directly at the scene. But there really was nothing to exonerate him from being a suspect. I mean, the only thing it did was his hair didn't match. But just because there was dead hair found doesn't mean that he didn't do it because anybody could have dead hair on them.
And also the murder that they cleared him for was the one that was unlike all the others.
Right. There's no reason to believe that they were necessarily related. We didn't. We thought that Herta did it the first time we watched it. And I thought so going into the second time as well. I was looking for reasons why there might have been a second murderer. And I don't think there was one in retrospect, but because I've already said why Bascombe would have a motivation to do it, because it didn't seem that clear the first time through why he would have a different motivation. So as weird as this movie is and as flawed as it is, I think it's an enjoyable watch. And when you're watching it through, it does seem to fly by a lot faster than when you piece it together and try and make sense of it, because you can't make sense of it. But I'm going to give this one an A for awesome as well.
You've agreed a lot lately, aside from the first Deadly Sin.
Yeah, I wasn't sure my second time starting at what I was going to give it. I knew it was going to be a high I or a low A, but I'm going to boost it up to A status.
Flawed, but an A movie.
Yes, definitely worth a watch. More so if you haven't listened to this episode because we spoiled the whole thing for you.
We always hope that you've watched the movie first and then you come listen to the episode. Or if you just can't find the movie, you use us as a substitute to find out what you missed. And now that you know what they did to Solange, find out even more about this movie and every other movie we've covered on the American International Podcast thus far. The place to do that is our website, aippod.com. That's where you'll find trailers, lobby cards, and posters, as well as where to watch the movies that we have covered, which you should watch before we cover them, like we said. There's a link to all our past episodes and a place where you can see the list of films we need your help locating for future episodes. You can contact us there and also find our store. A purchase of one of our fine items helps us keep the podcast and our site alive. Find it all on aippod.com.
Well, the final bell has rung for the School That Couldn't Scream, but we have one last word before we dismiss the class. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.